Could you fake happiness while carrying a pain no one wants to see? She did, until destiny decided to intervene with a face forgotten by time. It was in that instant, before everyone, that the truth exploded like a cry held back for years. And what comes next will stir you more than you imagine. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing. The lights of the Gilded Gates Club in London shone with an intensity that seemed to challenge the very moon on that Saturday night. The main ballroom, decorated with crystal chandeliers imported from Europe and Italian marble floors that reflected every movement like polished mirrors, was filled with familiar faces from the London elite. Businessmen, politicians, artists, and heirs to centuries-old fortunes circulated among glasses of French champagne and canapés served by impeccably uniformed waiters. It was the most anticipated charity event of the year, organized by the Living Hope Foundation, and attending was not just a matter of prestige. It was almost a social obligation for anyone wishing to maintain their name among the city's most influential circles. Marina Albright delicately held the glass of fresh orange juice she had ordered from the bartender, trying to disguise the discomfort she had felt since entering the room. 7 months pregnant, her navy blue Italian silk dress still managed to partially conceal her growing belly, but nothing could hide the tiredness in her greenish eyes or the tension that tightened her shoulders with every sudden movement beside her. She smiled mechanically at the greetings she received, nodding politely to acquaintances passing by, but her entire body seemed to plead for a moment of peace, a comfortable chair, perhaps even the possibility of simply going home. Beside her, Roderick Albright radiated confidence and power. Tall, broad-shouldered, with perfectly slicked-back greying hair, he wore a tailored tuxedo that highlighted his erect posture and imposing bearing. At 52, Roderick was the president of Albright Developments, one of the country's largest construction companies, responsible for erecting skyscrapers that redefined the London skyline and shopping centres that spread across the national territory. His handshake was firm, his smile calculated, and his presence commanded any environment he entered. Everyone wanted to be near him, everyone desired his attention, and he knew it. Roderick didn't just participate in that world of power and influence, he fed off it. Marina felt a sharp pang in her lower back and discreetly shifted her weight from one leg to the other, trying to relieve the pressure. The high heels Roderick had insisted she wear didn't help at all, but she knew protesting would be useless. As they prepared to leave the house, she had suggested wearing a lower, more comfortable pair, but he had looked at her with that expression she knew so well, a mix of disapproval and silent warning that needed no words. Marina didn't need to hear the sermon about appearances, about what was appropriate or expected of Roderick Albright's wife. She already knew it by heart. A couple approached them, smiling broadly. It was Henry Stevenson and his wife Beatrice, owners of a chain of luxury hotels. Roderick offered a warm smile and extended his hand to greet them, while Marina once again forced her lips to curve into a friendly gesture. Beatrice, in her silver dress that caught every reflection of light, hugged Marina carefully. "How's the baby, dear?" she asked, placing her hand briefly on Marina's belly. "It must be almost time, isn't it?" Marina nodded, trying to appear enthusiastic. "Still 2 months to go, but he seems to be in a hurry," she replied, forcing a light laugh. "Sometimes I think he wants to run out even before he's born." Beatrice chuckled, but Marina noticed the curious glance the woman cast at Roderick, as if trying to assess the dynamic between the couple. Before the conversation could continue, Roderick placed his hand on Marina's back, with a pressure she recognized immediately. It wasn't a gesture of affection. It was a warning. "Marina needs to rest a bit," Roderick said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The pregnancy has been tiring for her, but she insisted on coming. I couldn't convince her to stay home." The lie slipped so naturally from his lips that Marina almost believed he genuinely cared. The truth was exactly the opposite. Roderick had demanded she come, saying her absence would be misinterpreted, that people would comment, that he couldn't attend an event of that magnitude alone. And when Marina tried to argue that she was exhausted, that the doctor had recommended rest, he simply ignored her words and repeated with that tone that brooked no argument, that she would go. Henry gave Roderick a friendly pat on the shoulder. "You're a dedicated husband, Roderick. Marina is lucky." Marina lowered her eyes to the glass in her hands, feeling her stomach churn. Lucky? What a strange word to describe her life. The Stevenson couple said goodbye and headed towards the buffet, leaving Marina and Roderick alone again amidst the crowd. Marina took the opportunity to take another sip of her juice, but before she could bring the glass to her lips, she felt Roderick's fingers tighten on her elbow forcefully. "You're drinking too much," he said in a low but cutting tone. "You'll spend the whole night in the restroom and make us look bad." Marina looked at him confused. "It's orange juice, Roderick. The doctor said I need to stay hydrated." "I don't care what the doctor said. You've had enough. Leave that glass somewhere and keep quiet." Marina felt tears threaten to well up, but she pushed them down forcefully. She couldn't cry there, not in front of everyone. She couldn't give him another reason to humiliate her. She placed the glass on a nearby side table and crossed her hands over her belly, as if to shield the baby from it all. As Roderick turned to greet another acquaintance, Marina let her gaze wander across the ballroom. It was then that she noticed a man behind the bar counter in the opposite corner of the room. He was wiping glasses with a white cloth, his movements slow and precise, but there was something in his posture that made her pause. He didn't seem like just another employee doing his job. There was an intensity in his dark eyes, an attention that went beyond what would be expected of someone in that position. And for a brief instant, their gazes met. Marina felt a strange shiver run down her spine. There was something familiar about that face, in the way he watched her, but she couldn't identify what. Before she could think more about it, Roderick turned his attention back to her. "Let's circulate a bit," he ordered, placing his hand on her back again and gently pushing her towards the center of the ballroom. "I need to speak with the head of the Chamber of Commerce. And smile, Marina. You look like you're at a funeral." Marina obeyed as she always did. She smiled, greeted people, made polite comments about the event, about the decor, about how excited she was for the baby's arrival. But inside she felt as if she were falling apart bit by bit. Every harsh word from Roderick was one less sliver of her self-esteem. Every look of disapproval was another brick in the wall that imprisoned her, and worst of all, no one seemed to notice. Or perhaps everyone noticed, but chose to ignore it. After all, intervening in the affairs of a man like Roderick Albright was not exactly a wise decision. After almost an hour of circulating through the ballroom, Marina felt her legs begin to give way. The back pain had intensified, and she knew she needed to sit, even if only for a few minutes. She lightly touched Roderick's arm, who was engrossed in an animated conversation with two executives about a new venture in South London. "Roderick, I need to sit down for a bit," she whispered, trying not to interrupt him. He didn't even look at her. "Wait," he replied dryly, without diverting his attention from the conversation. Marina took a deep breath and tried to stand firm, but dizziness began to take hold. She searched with her eyes for an empty chair, but all were occupied or too far away. It was then that she noticed the man behind the bar counter again. This time, he wasn't just observing. He seemed worried, as if he could see through her, as if he could feel the discomfort she was trying so hard to hide. For some reason she couldn't explain, Marina felt a pang of hope. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Meanwhile, across the ballroom, behind the polished mahogany bar counter, Gabriel Miller wiped another crystal glass with automatic movements. But his eyes never strayed from the woman in the navy blue dress. He had recognized her the instant she entered the room, even though she clearly hadn't recognized him. How could she? Almost 12 years had passed since they last saw each other, and much had changed. He had changed. But she, despite the years and circumstances, was still the same Marina he remembered, his younger sister, the girl who used to run after him in the family's backyard, the teenager who cried on his shoulder when the world seemed too heavy. Gabriel tightened his grip on the cloth, feeling his jaw clench. He had distanced himself from the family after a series of difficult choices, decisions that at the time seemed necessary, but had cost him dearly. He had been expelled from home by his father, accused of having stained the Miller name with behaviors the family considered unacceptable. Gabriel had been rebellious, defiant, and had refused to follow the path laid out for him. So he left, leaving London behind, and spent years rebuilding his life from scratch in other cities, other counties. He worked hard, invested well, learned from the right people, and gradually built a fortune that rivaled many of those present in that ballroom. But he had done all this away from the limelight, away from the surname that had once condemned him. When he finally decided to return to London, it was with a specific objective. He wanted to observe, to understand what had happened to his family, to Marina, without exposing himself. And that's how he got that temporary job at the Gilded Gates Club, using a false name, presenting himself only as Gabriel, a bartender hired for special events. No one there knew who he really was. No one suspected that the man behind the counter was Gabriel Miller Alden, heir to one of the oldest fortunes in the United Kingdom, son of an industrialist who had built an empire in the mining sector. But now, seeing Marina there, visibly uncomfortable beside that man whom Gabriel had already researched extensively even before accepting the job that night, he felt all his intentions of remaining invisible begin to waver. Roderick Albright. Gabriel knew the type. Men who used power and money as tools of control, who saw their wives not as partners, but as extensions of their own image. Gabriel had read the articles about Roderick, about his questionable dealings, about the labor complaints that seemed to mysteriously disappear, about the way he treated employees. And now, observing the way he treated Marina, Gabriel felt an ancient anger begin to boil in his chest. He saw when Roderick squeezed Marina's arm forcefully. He saw when she tried to argue and was silenced. He saw the pain in her eyes, the resignation in her shoulders, and he saw, most importantly, that no one around seemed willing to do anything about it. Gabriel placed the glass on the counter and rested both hands on the wooden surface, trying to calm himself. He couldn't just cross the ballroom and confront Roderick. Not yet. He needed the right moment, an opening. But he also knew he couldn't stand there, watching his sister suffer, for much longer. A waiter approached the bar and asked for 3 more glasses of champagne. Gabriel prepared the drinks efficiently, but his eyes remained fixed on Marina. She was pale now, and he could see that she was struggling to stay on her feet. Why on earth wasn't anyone offering her a chair? Why didn't that scoundrel beside her realize she needed to sit? Then something happened that made Gabriel move before he even thought. Marina took a step to the side, clearly dizzy, and almost stumbled. Roderick held her by the arm, but not gently, with irritation. And it was at that moment, when he leaned in and said something in her ear that made her face pale even further, that Gabriel dropped everything and began to cross the ballroom. He didn't know exactly what he would do when he got there. He had no plan. But he knew he couldn't just stand by and watch anymore. Marina, meanwhile, felt the world spin around her. Roderick's words echoed, in her mind like poison. "You're making a scene. You're embarrassing me. If you can't behave, I'll take you home and you'll stay locked up there until you learn to act like an adult." She wanted to scream that she was pregnant, that she was tired, that he was cruel and insensitive. But the words wouldn't come out. They never did. Instead, she just nodded, feeling the tears finally escape and stream silently down her face. It was then that she heard the music stop abruptly and a strange silence take over the ballroom. Marina looked up and saw the man from the bar standing a few feet from her, his eyes fixed on Roderick with an intensity that cut through the air. And in that moment, even without understanding why, Marina felt that something was about to change. The silence that fell over the Gilded Gates Club was the kind that precedes storms. It wasn't just an absence of sound, it was a palpable, heavy presence that settled among the people like a dense fog. The musicians had stopped playing without anyone asking them to. The waiters had frozen with their trays suspended in the air. And all eyes, absolutely, all turned to the center of the ballroom, where Roderick Albright stared with scorn at the man who had dared to approach. Gabriel Miller stopped at a respectful distance from Marina, but his posture made it clear he would not back down. His eyes, dark and determined, did not stray from Roderick's face. He didn't need to say anything yet. His mere presence there, interrupting what should have been a private moment between a powerful couple, was a statement in itself. Roderick released Marina's arm and took a step forward, puffing out his chest like an animal preparing to defend its territory. "Who do you think you are?" he asked, his voice low but laden with menace. "You're an employee of this club. Get back to your station before I have you fired." Gabriel didn't move. His eyes briefly flickered to Marina, who watched him with a mix of confusion and something akin to relief, before returning to Roderick. "I am someone who won't stand by and watch a pregnant woman be treated this way," Gabriel replied calmly, but his voice carried a weight that made several people around them step back. Roderick let out a short, humorless laugh. "You have no idea who you're talking to. This is none of your business. This is my wife, and I take care of her in the way I deem appropriate. Now get out of my way, or I'll ensure you never work anywhere in this city again." Marina felt her heart pound. She wanted to say something, wanted to ask Gabriel not to get involved, not out of fear for him, but out of fear of what Roderick might do later, when they were alone. But the words tangled in her throat and wouldn't come out. She could only watch, petrified, as the tension grew. Beatrice Stevenson, the woman in the silver dress who had spoken with Marina earlier, took a step forward, as if to intervene, but her husband Henry held her by the elbow and shook his head slightly. "Don't get involved, Beatrice," he whispered. "This isn't our problem." But Beatrice couldn't look away. She had noticed, like other women present, the way Roderick treated Marina. It wasn't the first time she had witnessed small signs of disrespect, acidic comments disguised as jokes, touches that seemed more controlling than affectionate. But no one had ever said anything. No one had ever challenged Roderick Albright. Gabriel finally shifted his gaze from Roderick and focused on Marina. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice softening considerably. "Do you need anything? Water? A place to sit?" Marina opened her mouth, but before she could answer, Roderick exploded. "Don't you dare speak to her," he bellowed, drawing even more attention. "You are not permitted to speak to my wife. You're a nobody, a mere employee." It was at that moment that something in Gabriel changed. His expression, until then controlled, hardened. He took a step forward, approaching Roderick in a way that made the businessman instinctively recoil. "A nobody?" Gabriel repeated, his voice now louder, echoing through the ballroom. "An employee? Do you think you can treat anyone as inferior just because you have money and influence?" "I can do whatever I want," Roderick shouted, completely losing his composure. "You don't know who you're messing with. I am Roderick Albright. I build this city. I pay the salaries of people like you." The audience was now completely absorbed by the scene. Some discreetly pulled out their phones, starting to record. Others murmured among themselves, shocked by Roderick's behavior, who always presented himself as a polite and controlled man. Marina felt her legs give way again, and this time she truly began to fall. Gabriel moved with surprising speed, gently holding her by the arm before she could hit the floor. He helped her steady herself, and for a brief instant when their eyes met, Marina felt something stir within her, a distant memory, a recognition she couldn't name. "Get your hands off my wife," Roderick roared, and that's when everything collapsed. Roderick advanced towards Gabriel and Marina, his right hand raised, and before anyone could process what was happening, he delivered a strong slap to Marina's face. The sound echoed through the ballroom like thunder, silencing even the murmurs that had begun to form. Marina staggered back, her hand flying instantly to her face, her eyes wide with shock and pain. Her other arm instinctively wrapped around her belly, protecting the baby. The entire ballroom froze. It was as if time had stopped. No one breathed, no one moved. And then, slowly, like a wave forming before breaking on the shore, reality began to sink in. Roderick Albright, one of London's most respected and powerful men, had just assaulted his pregnant wife in front of hundreds of witnesses. Some women clapped their hands over their mouths, horrified. Men exchanged uncomfortable glances. Beatrice Stevenson finally broke free from her husband and rushed towards Marina, enveloping her in her arms. "It's all right, dear, it's all right," she repeated, though clearly nothing was all right. Gabriel remained absolutely motionless for 3 full seconds, processing what he had just seen. When he finally moved, it was with a frightening calm. He placed himself between Roderick and Marina, his protective stance making it clear that any new attempt at aggression would have to go through him first. "You just made a terrible mistake, Gabriel said, his voice low but vibrating with contained anger. Roderick, finally realizing the magnitude of what he had done, looked around and saw dozens of cell phones pointed at him, recording everything. His face, until then red with anger, began to pale. He reached out to Marina as if to fix what he had done. "Marina? I didn't mean to. You provoked me. You—" "Don't finish that sentence," Gabriel interrupted, his voice cutting like glass. "Don't you dare blame her for what you did." Roderick turned to Gabriel, and at that moment something in his expression changed. It was as if he was finally truly looking at the man in front of him, noticing not only his posture, but something in his eyes, in his bearing, that didn't match a simple club employee. "Who are you?" Roderick asked, this time without the arrogance from before, with a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Gabriel remained silent for a long moment, and then, with slow and deliberate gestures, he removed the black waistcoat that the bar staff wore and placed it on a nearby chair. He unbuttoned the cuffs of his white shirt and rolled them up to his elbows, a gesture that somehow completely transformed his presence. He no longer looked like an employee. He looked like someone taking off a costume and revealing who he really was. "My name is Gabriel Miller Alden," he said clearly, his voice now filling the entire ballroom. "And the woman you just assaulted is my sister." If the previous silence had been heavy, this one was crushing. Marina felt the world spin. She looked at Gabriel, really looked this time, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The eyes, the way he moved, the tone of voice. How had she not noticed before? Gabriel, her brother Gabriel, who had left so long ago, whom she thought she would never see again. "No," she whispered, tears now flowing freely. "Gabriel?" He turned to her and nodded slightly, his eyes moist. "Hi, Marina. I'm sorry it took me so long to come back." But the emotional reunion would have to wait, because the entire ballroom had exploded in murmurs and exclamations. Gabriel Miller Alden. The name was not unknown, although it was rarely spoken in London's social circles. The Miller Alden family was one of the oldest and wealthiest in the United Kingdom, with fortunes built in mining, transport, and more recently technology. But Gabriel had been the black sheep, the son who had rebelled and been expelled. Many thought he had disappeared forever, perhaps even died somewhere distant. No one imagined he had returned, much less that he was there disguised as an employee witnessing everything. Roderick turned ashen. He knew exactly what that name meant. He knew the power, the influence, the reach that the Miller Alden family had. And more importantly, he knew he had just assaulted the sister of one of the most dangerous men to make an enemy of. "This can't be happening," Roderick murmured to himself, running his hands through his hair. "This is a misunderstanding. Marina, tell him this is a misunderstanding." Marina pulled away when he tried to approach her again. "No," she said, her voice weak but firm. "It's not a misunderstanding, and I won't pretend it is anymore." Roderick looked around, desperate, seeing the judgmental glances, the cell phones still recording, the reality that his career, his reputation, everything he had worked for was crumbling in a matter of minutes. He tried to smile, tried to appear reasonable. "Folks, you know Marina. She's pregnant. Her hormones are all over the place. She invents things, exaggerates situations. I would never intentionally harm her. It was just a moment of frustration. I saw everything," a clear voice interrupted. It was Beatrice who still held Marina. "And it wasn't an accident, it was deliberate, it was violent, and it was absolutely unacceptable." Others began to agree, voices overlapping in a cacophony of condemnation. Roderick realized he had lost control of the narrative. He was no longer the victim of a misunderstanding. He was the aggressor, and everyone there had seen it. If you were living in this story, how would you react to witnessing an act of aggression at a public event? Would you intervene or remain silent? Leave your opinion in the comments. Gabriel approached Marina carefully, as if she was something fragile that could break at any moment. "Marina," he said softly, "you need to go to the hospital. You need to make sure the baby is all right." Marina nodded, still in shock, still processing everything that had happened. Gabriel was real. He was there. And for the first time in years, she wasn't alone. Roderick tried to block their path when Gabriel began, to guide Marina towards the exit. "She's not going anywhere without me," he said, his voice now tinged with desperation. "She's my wife." "She is not your property," Gabriel replied, his patience clearly running out. "And if you try to touch her again, I guarantee you won't just have cell phone cameras to worry about." The club's security, which had been paralyzed until then, unsure how to act in a situation involving such powerful people, finally moved. 2 security guards positioned themselves between Roderick and the rest of the group, creating a physical barrier. "Mr. Albright," one of them said, firmly, "we're going to have to ask you to leave the club." "You can't kick me out," Roderick shouted. "Do you know how much money I donate to this club? How many people I've brought here over the years?" "Even so, sir," the security guard replied, standing firm. "What happened here today cannot be ignored." Roderick looked around one last time, seeing only faces that judged him, that condemned him. He pulled his phone from his pocket and began to dial frantically. He needed to call his solicitor, the company president, anyone who could contain the damage. But he knew, deep down, that it was already too late. The video was already being shared, people were already talking, and there was no solicitor in the world who could erase what hundreds of witnesses had seen. As Roderick was escorted out by the security guards, Gabriel helped Marina walk towards the exit. Beatrice accompanied them, refusing to leave Marina alone. Other women from the event approached, offering support, sharing their own stories in low voices, creating a current of solidarity that Marina had never experienced before. Outside the club, the cool London night air hit Marina's face like an awakening. She took a deep breath, feeling for the first time in hours that she could truly breathe. Gabriel called his driver, a discreet black car that appeared in a matter of seconds. "We're taking you to the hospital," Gabriel said, helping her into the car. "We'll make sure you and the baby are all right, and then, Marina, then we'll talk about everything, about all these years, about what happened, about what will happen now." Marina nodded, too exhausted to speak. She leaned back in the soft leather seat and closed her eyes, feeling the tears silently stream, but this time they weren't just tears of pain. They were also of relief, of liberation, and perhaps of hope. The car began to move, leaving behind the Gilded Gates Club, where the party had turned into a heated discussion about what everyone had witnessed. Some defended Roderick, claiming everyone had moments of weakness, but the majority, especially the women, were furious, shocked, and determined that the assault would not be forgotten or minimized. Inside the club, Roderick finally managed to leave, but not before hearing fragments of conversations that made his blood run cold. "I always knew there was something wrong with him. Did you see how he treated the employees? My cousin worked at his company and said he was a tyrant. How disgusting! How dare he hit a pregnant woman?" He got into his own car, a gleaming black Mercedes, and slammed the door shut. His fingers trembled as he tried to call his solicitor again. When he finally got through, the words came out in a desperate torrent. "Robert, you need to fix this. You need to make the videos disappear. You need to issue a statement of clarification. You need to—" The solicitor interrupted him with a heavy sigh. "Roderick, I've seen the videos. They're everywhere already. Trending topic on X, WhatsApp groups, news portals. There's no way to make that disappear." "Then what do I do?" Roderick asked, his voice breaking. "You prepare yourself," the solicitor replied, "because this is going to get much, much worse before it gets better." Roderick hung up the phone and threw it onto the seat beside him. He slammed his hands on the steering wheel, screaming in frustration. How had everything crumbled so quickly? How had a simple slap turned into this? But while Roderick sank deeper into self-pity, without truly acknowledging the gravity of what he had done, Marina was at the hospital, lying on a stretcher, with Gabriel holding her hand and Beatrice by her side. The doctor had just finished the ultrasound examination and smiled reassuringly. "The baby is fine," she announced. "Strong and steady heartbeats. He's a fighter, just like his mother." Marina let out a sigh of relief, so deep it almost sounded like a sob. She squeezed Gabriel's hand tightly, and when he leaned in and kissed her forehead, it was as if a dam had broken inside her. She cried as she hadn't cried in years, releasing all the pain, all the fear, all the loneliness she had carried for so long. And as she cried, surrounded by people who truly cared about her, Marina made a silent promise to herself and the baby she carried. Never again. Never again would she allow anyone to treat her that way. Never again would she be silenced, diminished, controlled. She was stronger than she thought. And now, with her brother by her side, she finally had the strength to rebuild her life. The next morning dawned with London as bustling and noisy as ever, but for Marina, the world seemed to have completely shifted on its axis. She woke up in Gabriel's penthouse suite, in an affluent district of Primrose Hill, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets that smelled of lavender. For a brief moment, still drowsy, she almost forgot everything that had happened. But then her body moved. The pain in her face where Roderick had hit her throbbed like a cruel reminder, and all of reality returned like a violent wave. She sat up slowly in bed, raising her hand to her face and delicately touching the reddened area. A bruise was forming, a physical mark of what she had endured. Marina looked around the elegantly decorated room with its neutral-toned walls and carefully positioned abstract artworks and felt a wave of gratitude mixed with shame. Gratitude for not being alone, shame for having allowed her life to reach that point. A soft knock on the door drew her from her thoughts. "Marina?" It was Gabriel's voice, gentle and careful. "May I come in?" "Yes," she replied, quickly adjusting her hair. Gabriel entered carrying a tray with coffee, croissants, fruit, and fresh orange juice. He had changed from the previous night's tuxedo into a simple white t-shirt and jeans, a much more casual version of the brother she remembered, but still unmistakably him. His eyes, however, carried a deep concern. "How are you?" he asked, placing the tray on the side table and sitting in the armchair next to the bed. "Did you manage to sleep?" Marina nodded. "More than I expected. I think my body just shut down from exhaustion." She hesitated for a moment, then looked at him directly. "Gabriel, I still can't believe you're here. After so many years, after everything that happened." Gabriel sighed, leaning forward and resting his elbows on his knees. "I know, and I owe you explanations. Many explanations. But first, tell me how the baby is. The doctor said he was fine, but have you felt anything different? Any pain? Any discomfort beyond the obvious?" Marina placed her hand on her belly instinctively. "He's fine. He's kicking normally. He even seems more active today, as if he knows something important happened." She smiled faintly. "I think my son is already defending me even before he's born." "He's going to be strong," Gabriel said with conviction, "just like his mother." The words touched Marina in a way she hadn't expected, and she felt tears threaten to return. She blinked rapidly, trying to control them. "Gabriel, what's going to happen now? Roderick he'll try to force me back. He always does that. He always finds a way to make me feel guilty, to convince me that I exaggerated, that—" "He won't get near you," Gabriel interrupted firmly. "I've already spoken with my solicitors this morning. We're preparing a restraining order. And as for what happened yesterday, Marina, the whole world saw it. There's no way he can distort the narrative this time." Marina picked up the phone from the bedside table and, for the first time since the night before, unlocked it. The screen was immediately flooded with notifications, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, messages, comments, social media tags. Her heart quickened as she opened the news app and saw the main headline, "Businessman assaults pregnant wife at elite event. Videos shock the nation." She clicked on the article and saw that it wasn't just an isolated news item. All the major news outlets were covering the story. There were analyses from domestic violence experts, interviews with other women who had suffered abuse, debates on how the British elite frequently covered up such behaviors, and the videos, filmed from dozens of different angles by party guests, had gone viral. Millions of views, millions of comments. The overwhelming majority supporting Marina and condemning Roderick. Marina felt a strange mix of relief and terror. Relief because, for the first time, she had irrefutable proof of what had happened. Terror because her private life, her most humiliating moments, were now exposed for the entire world to see. "It's a lot to process," Gabriel said, observing her expression, "but I need you to know something important. This isn't just about you, Marina. What happened yesterday opened up a national conversation. Other women are starting to speak out, to tell their own stories. You have become, unintentionally, a symbol of resistance." Marina let out a humorless laugh. "A symbol? I just wanted to be invisible. I just wanted the night to pass without incident." She shook her head. "And now I'm here, the face of domestic violence in the United Kingdom. What irony." Gabriel stood up and approached her, kneeling beside the bed to be at her eye level. "Marina, you didn't ask for any of this. You are not to blame for what Roderick did. And if people are looking to you as an example, it's not because you failed, it's because you survived. Because you are here, still standing, still fighting." The tears Marina had tried to control finally fell. She leaned in and hugged her brother, feeling for the first time in 12 years the sense of security that only family can provide. Gabriel hugged her back, murmuring words of comfort as she cried on his shoulder. When she finally calmed down and pulled away, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, Gabriel returned to his armchair. "Now," he said, "I need to tell you a few things about where I've been, what I've done, and why I came back." Marina nodded, pulling a pillow to hug against her chest. Gabriel took a deep breath before beginning. "When Father threw me out of the house, when he said I was no longer part of the family, I was lost. You remember how I was back then, rebellious, defiant, always fighting against the expectations he placed on me. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, to take over the family business, to marry the daughter of some other powerful businessman. But I didn't want any of that. I wanted to find my own path." Marina remembered. She was only 15 years old when Gabriel left, but she remembered the fights, the slamming doors, the constant tension that permeated the house. "I went south first," Gabriel continued. "I worked in everything I could find, construction, bars, even as security at events. I had no money, no contacts, nothing but my determination. But I observed the people around me, learned how business truly worked, not through air-conditioned boardrooms, but on the streets, in real conversations." He smiled slightly. "It was the best education I could have received." "And then?" Marina asked. "Then I got lucky. Or talented. Maybe both. I met an investor who was starting a tech startup. He needed someone who understood both business and people. I came in as a minority partner, investing the little I had saved. The company exploded. In 3 years, we sold to an international conglomerate for an amount that, well, that completely changed my life." Marina's eyes widened. "So you're extremely successful, yes?" Gabriel leaned back in the armchair. "But money was never the goal, Marina. The goal was always to prove to myself that I could do it alone, without the family name, without father's connections. And I succeeded. After that first sale, I invested in other companies. Some took off, others didn't. But I built something real, something of my own." "And why did you come back? Why now?" Gabriel remained silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on some distant point. "Because I got tired of running away. I got tired of pretending I had no family, no roots. And because—" He looked at her directly. "I found out you had gotten married. To Roderick Albright. And when I started researching him, the kind of man he was, I got worried. I tried to contact you a few times, but you had changed your number, and all the channels I tried to use to find you were blocked." "By Roderick," Marina said softly. "He controlled everything. My phone, my emails, my social media. He said it was to protect me, but I know it was to isolate me." Gabriel clenched his fists, clearly struggling to control his anger. "So I decided to come back, but discreetly. I got the job at the Gilded Gates Club because I knew you frequented it, that eventually I would have the chance to see you, to assess the situation for myself." He shook his head. "I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was. I didn't expect to have to intervene like that. But when I saw him raise his hand to you, Marina, there was no choice. There was no universe where I would stand by and watch my sister be assaulted." Marina felt a wave of love and gratitude so strong it almost suffocated her. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for—" Being there. Always, Gabriel replied. I'll always be here now. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts, until Gabriel's phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. It's my solicitor. I need to take this. Marina nodded for him to go, and Gabriel left the room. Alone again, Marina forced herself to eat some of the breakfast he had brought. The croissant was fresh and crispy, the fruit sweet and juicy, but everything tasted like cardboard in her mouth. She knew she needed to eat for the baby, but her stomach was churning with anxiety. She looked at her phone again, and this time opened her messages. There were dozens of unknown numbers, but also messages from people she knew. Beatrice Stevenson had sent a long and affectionate message, offering all necessary support and making her home available as a refuge if Marina needed it. Other women from the club, whom Marina knew only superficially, had sent similar messages. It was as if a silent sisterhood had formed overnight. But there were also messages from Roderick, many of them. The first ones were furious, accusatory, demanding she return home immediately. Then came the manipulative ones, saying he was worried, that he needed to make sure she was all right, that everything could be resolved if they just talked. And the last ones were desperate, pleading, promising changes, swearing that it would never happen again. Marina read them all, and with each message she scrolled past, something inside her hardened. She recognized the pattern: anger, guilt, promises, the cycle that had repeated so many times throughout her marriage. But this time was different. This time the whole world was watching, and this time she had a real choice. With trembling fingers, Marina began to type a response. Not to Roderick, but to herself. A statement of intent. Roderick, I'm not coming back. Not now, not ever. What you did yesterday was the last straw of years of disrespect, control, and emotional abuse. I deserve more. My son deserves more. And I will do everything in my power to ensure he grows up in an environment where love is not confused with control, and where respect is the foundation of any relationship. She read the message 3 times before she had the courage to press send. When she finally did, she felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Gabriel returned to the room a few minutes later, his expression serious. We have news, he said. Roderick was temporarily removed from the company's presidency by the board of directors. They're doing damage control, trying to distance the corporate brand from his personal behavior. Additionally, the police are investigating the case. There's the possibility of him being formally charged with assault. Marina processed the information slowly. He'll try to reverse that, she said with certainty. He has expensive solicitors, political connections. Yes, Gabriel agreed. But this time, he's not just fighting against you. He's fighting against public opinion, against justice, against all the women who saw their own pain reflected in that scene. And that, Marina, is much more powerful than any expensive solicitor. Marina nodded, wanting to believe his words. But she knew Roderick. She knew his capacity for manipulation, his ability to turn situations in his favor. She knew the fight was just beginning. What do I do now? She asked, her voice small. How do I rebuild my life from here? Gabriel approached and took her hands. One step at a time. First, you recover, physically, emotionally. Then, you make the necessary legal decisions, divorce petition, asset division, custody of the baby. And throughout this entire process, you won't be alone. I'll be here. My solicitors will be here. And all these women who are supporting you, they'll be here too. Marina felt the tears return, but this time they were different. They weren't of pain or despair, but of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She squeezed Gabriel's hands and nodded. All right, one step at a time. At that moment, the baby kicked hard, so hard that Marina let out a small exclamation of surprise. Gabriel looked at her belly and smiled. I think he agrees with the plan. Marina laughed for the first time in days, a genuine and light sound that filled the room. Yes, I think so. Meanwhile, across the city, in his empty mansion in Hampstead, Roderick Albright was plunged into his own personal hell. The house that had always been a symbol of his success and power now seemed enormous and cold without Marina. He had spent the night drinking expensive whiskey, trying to numb the reality of what had happened. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Marina's shocked face, heard the sound of the slap echoing through the ballroom, felt the judgment of hundreds of eyes on him. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. His solicitor, the company board, the press office he had hastily hired, all wanting to know how to proceed, all with bad news. Shares of Albright Developments had fallen 20% at market open. Business partners were re-evaluating contracts. Ongoing projects were being questioned. And worst of all, his reputation, meticulously built over decades, was in ruins. Roderick threw the empty glass against the wall, watching it shatter into thousands of pieces. How had a woman, a pregnant woman, who should have been grateful for everything he had given her, managed to destroy everything he had built? How had Gabriel Miller Alden, a ghost from the past, appeared precisely on that night, at that moment, to turn him into a villain? He refused to accept that it was his fault. He refused to see that years of control, manipulation, and disrespect had culminated in that explosive moment. In his distorted mind, he was the victim, betrayed by his wife, unfairly exposed, persecuted by a bloodthirsty mob. And while Roderick sank deeper into his denial and self-pity, the world outside continued to turn. Women continued sharing their stories. Journalists continued investigating. And Marina, finally, began to envision a future where she was not defined by the man she had married, but by her own strength and resilience. 3 months had passed since that fateful night at the Gilded Gates Club, and London had witnessed a transformation that few could have predicted. Marina sat on Gabriel's penthouse balcony, gently cradling the baby who had been born 2 weeks prior. Peter Gabriel, she had named him, in homage to the brother who had given her back her freedom and the son who represented her new beginning. The little one slept peacefully in her arms, oblivious to the turmoil that had surrounded his arrival into the world. The sunset painted the London sky with shades of orange and pink, and Marina allowed herself a moment of peace, something that had once seemed impossible. She wore comfortable clothes, without the worry of maintaining appearances. Her hair fell naturally over her shoulders, and her face, free of heavy makeup, showed the marks of sleepless nights but also a glow that came from within. It was the glow of someone who was finally living on her own terms. The sound of footsteps drew her from her thoughts. Gabriel appeared on the balcony carrying 2 cups of tea. He placed one beside her and sat in the adjacent chair, observing his nephew with a tender smile. "He looks like an angel when he's sleeping," Gabriel commented. Marina chuckled softly. "You don't say that when he's crying at 3 in the morning. But yes, he's perfect." She looked at her brother with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you these past few months, Gabriel. You gave me so much. More than a place to stay. You gave me my life back." Gabriel shook his head modestly. "You did that yourself, Marina. I merely gave you the support you always deserved. The strength was always in you. You just needed to remember it." Marina thought about the last 3 months and could hardly believe everything that had happened. After that morning in Gabriel's penthouse, when she sent the message to Roderick declaring her intention not to return, things moved quickly. Gabriel's solicitors had filed a request for a restraining order, which was immediately granted due to the repercussion of the case and the irrefutable evidence. Roderick was forbidden from approaching Marina within 100 meters. The divorce proceedings had begun, and although Roderick tried to complicate every step, fighting for custody of the baby and trying to minimize the division of assets, public opinion was firmly on Marina's side. Each attempt of his to play the victim was met with more indignation, more exposure of his past behaviors. Employees who had been unfairly dismissed began to speak out. Former business partners revealed questionable practices. Roderick's empire was not just cracking, it was crumbling. Albright Developments had been forced to permanently remove Roderick from the presidency after investigations revealed tax and labor irregularities that had been covered up for years. The company was now under new management, desperately trying to distance itself from the scandal its former president had caused. Roderick, in turn, faced multiple lawsuits, from the assault on Marina to accusations of workplace harassment. But what surprised Marina most was the wave of solidarity she received. Women from all social classes, from all parts of the United Kingdom, reached out sharing their own stories. Some had lived through similar situations, others were still trapped in abusive relationships and saw in Marina an example that it was possible to leave. Beatrice Stevenson, the woman in the silver dress, had become a close friend, visiting Marina regularly and even helping to organize a support group for women victims of domestic violence. An investigative journalist named Felicity Rivers, who had been present at the party, published a series of reports detailing not only Marina's case, but the broader pattern of abuse that powerful men frequently perpetuated, protected by their wealth and influence. The articles won a journalism award and helped drive legislative changes related to domestic violence in the Greater London area. Marina looked at little Peter sleeping in her arms and felt a renewed determination. She didn't want her son to grow up in a world where such behaviors were normalized or ignored. She wanted him to grow up knowing what true respect, genuine empathy and love that didn't come with control meant. "Gabriel," she said softly, "I've been thinking about something." He looked at her with attention. "About what?" "About using what happened to me to help other women, not just by talking about it, but by creating something concrete. A foundation, perhaps, that offers legal, psychological and financial support for women who want to leave abusive relationships but lack resources." Marina took a deep breath. "I know I have a platform now, even if I didn't ask for it, and I think it would be a waste of this opportunity if I didn't do something good with it." Gabriel smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "I think that's an incredible idea, and you can count on my full support, financial and otherwise. In fact," he leaned forward, "I even have a name suggestion. How about the New Beginnings Foundation? Because that's exactly what you're doing, and it's what you can help other women do too." Marina felt tears of emotion well up in her eyes. "It's perfect." In the following days, Marina and Gabriel began working on the project. They hired solicitors specialized in women's rights, psychologists with experience in trauma, and social workers who could help with practical issues like housing and employment. News of the foundation leaked to the press, and once again Marina found herself in the spotlight, but this time it was different. This time she was in control of the narrative. While Marina built her future, Roderick sank deeper and deeper into his past. The mansion in Hampstead, once a symbol of his success, was now for sale, part of the asset division of the divorce. His so-called friends had disappeared. No one wanted to be associated with the man who had become synonymous with marital abuse. He had tried to give interviews, defend himself publicly, but each appearance worsened his image. His excuses sounded hollow, his justifications were weak, and his refusal to truly accept responsibility for what he had done only fueled more indignation. One afternoon, 3 weeks after Peter's birth, Marina received a call from her solicitor. "Mrs. Albright, or rather, Ms. Miller," he corrected himself, respecting the fact that Marina had gone back to using her maiden name. "I have news about the case." Marina felt her stomach clench. "What happened?" "Roderick accepted all our terms. The asset division as we proposed, no contestation over Peter's custody, and he signed a waiver of any visitation rights until the boy is old enough to decide for himself if he wants contact with his father. Additionally, he agreed to bear a significant alimony and established a trust fund for Peter's education." Marina remained silent for a moment, processing. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why would he accept all this? He fought against every small detail until now." The solicitor sighed. "I believe he finally realized there was no way to win. The evidence against him was overwhelming, public opinion was completely against him, and continuing to fight would only prolong his public agony. Besides, he is facing possible criminal charges. His solicitors probably advised that cooperating in the divorce could be viewed favorably by the judge in the criminal case." Marina closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and something she hadn't expected, a hint of sadness. Not sadness for Roderick, but for the death of a dream she once had. The dream of a happy marriage, a united family, true love. But she also knew that that dream was based on an illusion, and that the reality she was now building, though harder, was infinitely more valuable. "Thank you for keeping me informed," she said to the solicitor. "Send the final documents when they're ready." After hanging up, Marina sat for a long time, absorbing the news. Gabriel, who had overheard part of the conversation, approached. "How are you feeling?" "Free," she replied with honesty. "For the first time in years, truly free." The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later, in a brief hearing where Roderick didn't even appear, sending his solicitor in his place. Marina signed the documents with a steady hand, each signature a step further from the nightmare she had lived and a step closer to the life she wanted to build. When Marina left the courthouse that afternoon, she was greeted by a small group of women who had gathered to show support. They carried signs with messages of encouragement and strength. One of them, a young woman no older than 25, approached shyly. "Ms. Miller, may I speak with you for a moment?" Marina nodded, smiling encouragingly. "I just wanted to thank you," the young woman said, her eyes moist. "I was in a relationship very similar to yours. My boyfriend controlled me, isolated me from my friends and family, made me feel like I was crazy for questioning his behavior. But when I saw what happened to you, when I saw you stand up and say no, I found the courage to do the same. I broke up with him a month ago, and I'm starting my life over." Marina felt tears stream freely as she hugged the young woman. "Thank you for sharing that with me, and congratulations on your courage. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be respected. You deserve to be loved in the right way." As Marina walked away from the courthouse, Gabriel by her side and Peter sleeping peacefully in his pram, she looked back one last time, not at the building itself, but at everything it represented. The end of a chapter, the closing of a wound, and the beginning of something new. The months that followed were of intense but gratifying work. The New Beginnings Foundation was officially launched at an event that gathered hundreds of people, including several public figures who supported the cause. Marina gave an emotional speech, telling her story with details she had never shared publicly before, not because she wanted to expose her pain, but because she knew that her vulnerability could help other women feel less alone. In its first year of operation, the foundation helped over 500 women leave abusive relationships, offering everything from temporary shelter to free legal assistance. Marina was present in many of these journeys, talking with the women, listening to their stories, offering her support. And with each woman she helped, she felt her own healing deepen. Peter grew fast, a smiling and healthy baby who brought joy to everyone around him. Gabriel was a dedicated uncle, often arriving from work with new presents and spending hours playing with his nephew. The family Marina thought she had lost had been rebuilt, stronger and more authentic than ever. One evening, almost a year after that fateful party at the Gilded Gates Club, Marina was again on a balcony, but this time on her own penthouse balcony, a beautiful apartment in Belgravia that she had bought with her share of the asset division. Peter was sleeping in his room and Marina held a cup of tea as she watched the city lights twinkle below. Her phone rang. It was Beatrice. "Marina, have you seen the news?" "No. Why?" Roderick was convicted. The criminal case. He was found guilty of assault and will have to pay a heavy fine and perform community service. Additionally, he will have to attend an aggressor rehabilitation program. Marina took a deep breath. "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly," Marina said after a pause, "I feel at peace. Not joyful, not vengeful, just at peace. Justice has been served, and now we can all move forward." And that was exactly what Marina did. She moved forward, not forgetting what she had been through, but not letting it define her. She was more than a victim. She was a survivor, an activist, a mother, a sister, a friend. She was a woman who had looked into the abyss and decided to climb back to the light. And as London continued its frantic dance of life and movement, Marina allowed herself a smile. She had survived the storm, she had found her voice. And now she was helping others find theirs too. Marina's story was not one of perfection or a happy ending in the traditional sense. It was a story of resilience, of transformation, of choosing herself even when the world seemed to be against her. It was a story that proved that even in the darkest moments, when hope seems distant and the future uncertain, there is always a way back to the light. Sometimes, all we need is a moment of courage, an outstretched hand, and the determination to believe we deserve more. And Marina, holding her cup of tea as the stars began to appear in the London sky, knew she had found exactly that. She had found herself, and that, in the end, was all she needed. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Marina and Gabriel's story has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by Marina's journey of courage and new beginnings, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what stood out most to you in this story. Does her strength inspire you? Do you know someone who went through something similar? Every day we bring intense stories, like this, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul. Stories of overcoming, love, family, and transformation. We await you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions. Until next time.